So,
Good morning.
welcome everyone this morning. My name is Jennifer Smith, and I am with the Wisconsin Out of School Time Alliance, which is a program of the Marshfield Clinic region of Sanford Health. I want to welcome you all today to our webinar, Unlocking Resilience Tools to Help Children and Youth Cope with Anxiety and Depression with Dr. Offenwanger. We're very happy to have her with us today. This webinar is part of an ongoing mental health learning series. We're working to provide all of you with some tools and strategies to support the mental well-being of young people in your program spaces. This series is made possible through a partnership between the Wisconsin Out of School Time Alliance and the Wisconsin Department of Children and Families, and of course, Marshfield Clinic's behavioral health team is providing with us with their expertise today. So before we start, we want to remind everyone, microphones on mute. Please, if you have questions, you can post them in the chat. Jill and I will be monitoring that throughout. Also of note, this webinar is being recorded and will be housed on the WASTA YouTube channel. It should be up in a couple days if you want to review or share it with others. And we will also be adding the PowerPoint slides from this presentation to our website. And so with all logistics aside, I am going to turn it over to Dr. Offenwanger.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone.
Oops.
I appreciate you joining me on this wonderful Wednesday morning. Hopefully everyone is staying warm. If you're in the North Woods, if you're somewhere else, hopefully you're staying warm as well. I'm going to share my slide. As Jen mentioned, there'll be a copy of the slides available. Afterwards, I'll have my contact information at the end of the slides as well. You're more than welcome to reach out to me personally or through our great WASTA team. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and get us started. Okay. So my goal today is talking about resilience, and you'll see a theme throughout the slides. They're going to kind of be on top of each other like stepping stones. Kind of one leads to the next. So we're going to talk about anxiety and depression. We're going to talk about ways to combat that. And then how do we build that self-efficacy moving forward, ultimately leading to resilience at like the top of the chain. So there's going to be a flow to it. Feel free to write in the chat at any time. Jen will be monitoring that too, and we are going to get moving forward. So the agenda for today is going to really focus on how do we teach tools to help youth overcome depression and anxiety and keep it away. This doesn't mean that they're never going to be anxious or depressed again, but how do we make it less impactful on them? We're going to learn the difference between self-esteem and self-efficacy. Those words can be tossed around a lot, but there's a big difference. With that esteem, more of the confidence, the efficacy, more of our perceived ability in our actions. And then identify the role of resilience. This is something that can be taught and learned, but it also takes failures and practice over time too. So again, if the role of resilience in mental health, it can really help us perpetuate a positive cycle moving forward. So before I jump into the meat and bones of the presentation, I just wanted to thank you all for being here. You have a choice with your time, and I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today. Also, with the colder weather in the North Woods, I thought the positive mindset with a warm, calm beach can hopefully lead us feeling a little bit more relaxed and recharged going into the presentation. But again, thank you so much. So when we think about depression and anxiety, it often co-occurs among children and adolescents. This slide is likely not going to be anything new to anyone on this presentation, but it's more so of how do we set the frame for what we're going to talk about. We know that having higher self-esteem can allow youth to effectively manage their emotions and navigate difficult experiences with greater coping mechanisms. We want tools for our toolkit to handle different situations. And then when we can have those tools in our toolkit, that builds resilience. That builds our belief that we are able to achieve a task. So it's a protective buffer in place against that anxiety and depression. And it helps us adapt to change in challenging situations because we know that's one of the only constants. It helps us bounce back from setbacks. We didn't do well on a test. We didn't do well on an exam. We didn't pass our driver's test. Okay, hey, things happen. That's life. How do we recover from that? And then maintain a positive outlook moving forward. It doesn't mean we have to like what's happening around us, but how do we keep that mindset going that can keep us on a positive stress moving forward? So when I look at presentations, I like to start with stats and kind of fact check what's going on. So across the globe, there's different youth risk behavior surveys that are done on an annual basis. The picture that you'll see on the right is a study that was done by Statista. And this was done last year. So it talked about nearly 1 in 5 US teens experienced depression in 2023. So a lot of the data that we have is focused on kind of a year ago or 2 years ago. But when we look on the left, those stats really align, and that is from the youth data from the 2023 Mental Health America survey. I have a lot of the links and resources at the end. Great site if you want to dive a little bit more deeper into what's maybe happening in your community or your state. But roughly 1 in 5 adolescents are reporting experiencing symptoms of anxiety or depression. About 20% of them having at least one major depressive episode in the past year. So major depressive episode relates to having a couple weeks of a depressed mood, loss of interest in activities that are going on. So we think about our teens and our youth, 2 weeks is a really long time. A lot can happen, especially if our mood is deteriorating or feeling more low or withdrawing. So 20% talked about that major depressive episode. And then again, around 12% of youth are experiencing severe major depression, which is more symptoms happening at a higher frequency. And then we think of anxiety. About 20% of youth are experiencing anxiety symptoms within this past week. So 1 in 5, you may say, okay, that's a handful in a typical class. But what that can then trickle down to, and if it's 1 in 5 this week versus another data this week, that number can really build up. So narrowing it down to Wisconsin, which I think most of the people on this presentation are from, what's kind of happening in our own backyards. And so the Mental Health America also has their annual surveys. The website is great because you can use your cursor to go over the different states, look at your numbers, and see how you rank in these 7 different areas. So overall, it comes up with kind of a wellness score for the state. Wisconsin is in the light blue, which is a good sign, which means you're at the higher number. A higher number means the lower prevalence of mental illness and higher rates of access to care. So last year, Wisconsin was at a 4, pretty awesome and exciting. Or sorry, last year, in 2023. This past year, we are at a 12. So a little bit lower, but still within that upper echelon of where we want to be. And it looks at major depressive episodes, substance abuse, suicidal thoughts, IEPs for emotional disturbance, getting access to care as well. So their overall score was still pretty good, lower than last year, but not so bad. Diving in a little bit deeper, one of the areas that strived when we looked at this Mental Health America survey for Wisconsin was students identified with emotional disturbance for their IEP program. So Wisconsin ranked 6th, meaning not as many students, or a very lower percentage of kiddos identified with that. We know there's been so many wonderful efforts being put in place with our after school programs, our out of school time networks, to help support these kids after school, but also those tier 1 and tier 2 supports that are being done for the kids at the school. So hats off to everyone, on this call too, that's working really hard within the school system and after school programs to help that number out. Thinking about a little bit more about a major depressive episode in the past year. So again, last year did fairly well. We're at a 9, this year at a 15. So the upper half, but we're seeing it kind of climb and seeing it reach. Also with substance use disorder, we're seeing this one climb pretty significantly. And substance use disorder can also include kind of vaping or other areas too that we may have withdrawal type of symptoms as well. So our bandwidth for substance use is increasing. It's likely we're going to see that number rise, but a great time to have this presentation to talk about what we can do to help notice some of the signs, because oftentimes when we look at substance use and changes, we see anxiety and depression come at the forefront. Youth with thoughts of suicide. This is kind of climbing up as well. And we're right kind of middle towards the end. So this is one of the areas that I'm hoping to hit hard today with building a sense of resilience, is how can we help this number go down? Wisconsin's ranking 32nd when we think about youth that are having serious thoughts of suicide, having a plan, wanting to enact on that plan, having these suicidal thoughts that aren't just kind of going away, which could then lead to a lot more serious kind of consequences and intervention. So with that today, we really want to focus on how do we kind of get some of those supports, knowing that there's growth that Wisconsin can do when we think about how do we have access to care. And not everyone does, but hoping that you can use some of the tools today that we talk about to be able to share with the youth, kids at home, family members, to help lower these numbers a little bit for our community. So with that work, I want to talk next about our brain. And you may say, why is this slide in here? It may not kind of necessarily fit, but my goal is to say that when we think about chronic stress, anxiety, or depression, it impacts our brain. So this image on the left is pretty key. A normal brain, we have more of the green areas in there that are lighting up. We think more of a depressed brain, a more anxious brain. It's not as vibrant. It impacts our brain and pathways over time. So yes, anxiety and depression symptoms can be normal at times, normal reactions. However, if they're going on, they're that persistent, that major depressive, it will start to impact how our brain functions. It can decrease attention, decrease our memory, decrease our ability to learn information, lead to chronic stress, inadequate sleeping patterns, and ultimately change the anatomy. So I wanted to stress that before we get started too, is that these tools can really help make positive changes in pathways in our brain and serve as a preventative measure for more long-term care. So let's get down to it. How do we combat anxiety and depression? What are the tools that we need? And this is probably one of my favorite slides because I think about all of these great things that you are already doing and how do we help get back to the basics? One of the first things that we think about is making connections. I'm trained in Adlerian psychology, and one of the things that we talk mainly about is the fundamental human desire. What is at the connection of being whole? And a sense of belongingness is often key. When we feel like we belong, we have a place, we are heard, it tackles a lot of these areas. So making connections, having a daily routine is important. It's a new year, we may have new goals, maybe some of the same ones, but having the same routine is key. Mornings, nights, evenings. Study just came out on sleep that said even a 15-minute deviation from the time we wake up and go to bed can impact our circadian rhythms and impact our sleep patterns. So realistically, that may not be feasible to do during the week and on the weekends, especially with busy families, our life, but thinking about keeping that daily routine as consistent as possible, or even just a chunk of it. Thinking of being attuned to others. Attuned involves actively listening, being a part of our community, noticing what is going on, and keeping things in perspective. Anxiety and depression tend to get bigger and stronger when things get out of perspective. We want to keep a constant going on. We want to think about things in the moment. What's in our control versus what's out of our control? If it's out of our control, can we leave that behind? What do we need to focus on? And think about our perspective within our programs and our roles. Whether you're here attending this as a parent, a facilitator, a teacher, a coach, what is your role? What can we keep in perspective? And accepting change. This will come up again later on. But change is the one constant. Life is constantly evolving and changing, and that's where that resiliency piece comes in. We may not expect it, it may come out of the blue, but if we can bounce back from that change, adapt to that change, accept that change, doesn't mean we have to like it either, but that can build resiliency and help protect us from that anxiety and depression getting stronger. And with that being said, if we can use some of those 5 tools in there, we can help stay in that window of tolerance, which is that nice kind of white area in the middle. Things may go up, things may go down, but if we can start to build up our toolkit, have some of these preventative efforts, our goal is to stay more in the white. So when something happens, when we lose a job, fail a test, break up with a friend, we're not going to the reds or the blues. We're staying a lot more to the middle. So building blocks, stepping stones, launching pad, diving board, springboard, however you want to call it, that's what we're going to focus on more, is how do we build these steps towards resiliency. And we look at that quote on the right-hand side, when you face tough times, think of them as stepping stones to a stronger you, a better you. So self-efficacy, kind of our first definition of the day, is your perceived ability to attain your goal. Different than self-esteem, we think of like confidence, but for our perceived ability, can I do this? How am I going to go into that test? How am I going to go into this game? How am I going to go into this conversation with a parent, a coach? Our ability to achieve our goals. And that's what we're trying to step on. So taking us a little bit back in time to 1967, there's a great book that came out related to self-efficacy. And I want to read these quotes because they still hold very true today. And so we think about the definition, the extent to which an individual believes himself to be capable, significant, successful, and worthy. If we believe those things, anxiety and depression tends to be a lot lower. We think about a personal judgment of worthiness that is expressed in attitudes the individual holds towards himself. We are worthy. We are important. And the foundation upon which the child will build the capacity to cope with stress over a lifetime. So we're learning tools and skills that are going to benefit us throughout our life. How do we build upon those? Set that strong foundation now. So how do we go about that? One of the things that we need to do is it starts with us. Like I said, we collectively, adults, need to help realize that we're all vivid. This is a term that we use within our Life Tools program. It's an acronym for, we think about we are more valuable than cake, that's our first V. We think about we are imperfect, and that's okay. It's okay to make mistakes. We're valuable. We are independent, immature, and dependent on others as well. So we are all vivid. And remembering that we are more valuable than cake. It's okay to lean on others for help. No one is loved and approved by all. It's okay to make mistakes, and we can learn from our failure. Everyone does some things well and some things not so well. And we don't need to always be competitive. It's a tough world out there. There's a lot of things that are going on. So how can we as adults start set this stage? How can we start to realize the things on this slide? And then how do we instill that with our kiddos? And one of the first steps is to encourage. We think about the very, very little years, encouraging to eat, to crawl, to walk, to anything along those lines. We encourage, we support. And how many times do little kids fall down? A lot. How many times do little kids get bumps or bruises because they're trying something new? Probably a lot. But we want to encourage them to like themselves, that they are okay. And this starts with the comments that we make to us. How do we talk around them about our own bodies, about other people? How do we show concern for others and helping them? How do we express emotion, especially love? There's an adult studies out there that talk about what adults wish they would have received from their parents growing up. And love is saying I love you is number 2 on that list, of which they wish they heard more. And then meeting new people and trying new challenges. That's that big piece for that resiliency. How do we get out there and try something new? It doesn't mean we need to master it. It doesn't mean we need to have a bunch of friends. But how do we try some of these things, knowing that a lot of that comes from within? And then developing these skills. So frustration tolerance, it builds over time when things don't go our way, things that we do not like. So again, we say you have a low frustration tolerance. I get that. There's a lot of things that may not go our way, but how do we move forward from that? How do we start to develop ideals and preferences that are independent of others? This is key for our self-efficacy. We are our own person. We can stand on our own 2 feet or in a chair, whatever our abilities may be. But helping our kids realize that they can have point of views and differences from other people. It's not too fun to be all alike. And having a sense of humor. If we can instill this more, we'll laugh more, we'll smile more, we can get over more. But a sense of humor is also key. Helping that self-efficacy. How can we kind of laugh at ourselves, laugh and roll things off? Again, recover from those setbacks. And teaching tools. Handle situations with confidence. Doesn't mean we have to go in saying we're going to be an all-star. But saying, again, I can do this. Having that positive outlook. Being optimistic, but accepting defeat. It's highly unlikely that we're going to win every time. But how can we go in there with a positive attitude? Accept the delay of gratification. This is a lot harder in this day and age, and we're used to getting things at our fingertips. The frustration tolerance and delay of gratification kind of go in the same realm. But knowing how do we take a breath in between if something's not going our way, if something isn't fitting into place, how do we handle that? Again, thinking back to our younger kids with learning to read, to write, to fix something. There's going to be mistakes and failure. And that through across our developmental span, there's going to be those as well. But knowing those limits, knowing what we are capable of, and using constructive ways of dealing with conflict and difficulties. Those constructive ways often talking about them and having a plan. So again, teaching tools. Not every tool works right for a certain job. So that's why we want to build our toolkit to have different options with us. And then demonstrating ways of displaying and expressing our emotions. What does that look like? Again, eyes are watching us at all times. We need to have that mutual respect. One of the comments that can kind of definitely fuel kids up is because I'm an adult, because I said so. I'm a strong believer in that we all deserve respect. Doesn't matter your age, gender, race, nationality, but that respect for one another as a person. And that goes hand in hand with showing empathy and compassion. This is hard, trying to put ourselves in their shoes, taking a moment to kind of step out of our role to say, what would it be like if X, Y, and Z then happened? And then ultimately making repairs. This is a powerful one. I have the 3 A's there. I like different kind of acronyms, but the 3 A's stand for kind of admitting, apologizing, and amending. I'm so sorry I yelled at you. What can I do to make up for it? Can I give you a hug? Hey, I'll try and work on that. Hey, can you kind of let me know when maybe I need to take a break? So how do we use those 3 A's to build upon that relationship skill, demonstrating a way of accepting apologies, making repairs, and being able to amend? And remember, listening without interrupting. This is tough and hard too, but active listening is a skill, a strong skill that everyone probably needs to work on a little bit more. But that means we're paying attention. We're looking at the verbal and nonverbal cues. We're not thinking about something else. We're not thinking about what to say next. We're not trying to fix what's going on. We're just there to listen. And this could also be helpful to ask, what do you need from me in this conversation? Do you want advice? Do you want me to just listen? How can I help you in this moment? And this goes along the lines with respecting their right to do it differently. We're not jumping in to solve or fix. They may have a different idea. This is where we build resiliency because they may do it differently and it may not go so great. But hey, they learned that by themselves. We're there to help support them kind of pick back up. It doesn't mean we're solving it for them, but we're there. And the power of adults being able to share a time when they maybe quit, when they didn't cope so well. That is powerful. I think of some of the therapy sessions that I have, and when adults are able to share those times of things that were hard or what they did in a similar situation, the way a kid's eyes kind of light up, their face. First of all, there's that sense of belongingness. They're not alone in this. And hey, we all go through different times. We all have things that we can work on a bit. Okay, thinking about respect. We deserve respect. We deserve to give respect to others and respecting the individual temperament. Some kids may have a more challenging temperament at different times of their life, and that's okay. We just got to get creative with the tools that we use. Thinking about their apprehension of change. Change is scary. Change is hard. Change underneath that really brings out anxiety, the apprehension of change. So how do we work with it? How do we plan, prepare? And respecting the person versus addressing the behavior. And what I mean by this is that we may not like a behavior, but think about how we talk to a child when they do something that we may not agree with, maybe against the rules. How do we think of them? You're not a bad person, a bad kid. We may not make the great choices at times, but you as a person are loved and respected and cared for. And thinking about the conflict of coexisting needs for independence versus dependence. This is going to happen for a long, long time. A lot of the youth that we work with, kids that we work with, they want to build up themselves, and they still kind of need us. So how do we balance that? And again, knowing too, the younger they are, kind of what we do, what they see can make a big difference. So provide. How do we talked about developing, we talked about teaching, we talked about showing, providing affectionate touch. This can be different topics or different areas, but again, how do we have that hug? How do we kind of lend a hand on their shoulder? We think about our sensory nervous system, and having that pressure of a hug, a hand can let them know that we're there. And it also can be involved in that active listening. We may not need to say anything, but just being there, being next to them can mean the world. Think about flexible and firm limits. There's rules. There can be some bending. There's some gray area at times. But we want to be a little bit flexible. We think about different parenting styles out there. We know that there's authoritative, authoritarian. That authoritative works best. There's these gray areas, but we have those limits. It helps keep those routines in place. And the limits are explained and reasonable. If there's questions about them, how do we collaboratively problem solve through that? Thinking about opportunities for success and allowing for failure. That's again, that resiliency piece. And the chance for the child to solve the problem first. What are your ideas? I often say there's no bad ideas out there. All the ideas can go on the table. then we can kind of maybe pick and choose one to try. There's no bad ideas out there. And reinforcement for good, even routine behavior. Oftentimes, what I will see is that when things start to kind of go smoothly, things are going smoothly, so it's nice. But we don't praise those behaviors at the moment. So, hey, you know what? Nice job getting your shoes on and out of the house. I really appreciate that. Hey, thank you for kind of brushing your teeth. You did a good job getting your toothbrush back in there. Thank you for holding the door open for a friend. Thank you for putting that away. Good behavior, routine behavior, positive, positive, positive praise. The more specific, the better. And what we want to avoid. Well, again, this isn't as surprising. Think about how many times this may come out. The labeling, the shaming, the comparing. At home more than maybe with others, but think about on a team, a coach, a game. The comparing really sticks with kids. And crafting negative images. We want to stay positive. We want to have that positive outlook and realize that, again, every child is gifted in their own way. They just unwrap their packages at different times. So thinking about goals, thinking about mistakes, we go back to vivid. It's okay to be imperfect. It's okay to be immature. We depend on each other. But what we need to think about is laudable goals. And Dr. Micah Miller, he was a psychologist through the Marshall Clinic and retired a handful of years ago. But he always used this phrase, and I really like it. And it talks about, again, we think, take a moment to kind of go through your own scenario of this. If we tell them, we show them, we direct them, then they will improve and they will listen and things will be great. In a perfect world, I would say, okay, absolutely. For certain kids in certain situations, that may go how it is. However, it's coming from a good place. We want our kids to learn life lessons without any mistakes or blunders. We want them to do well. We don't want them to get frustrated and upset. However, that's often not realistic. So with that being said, this is kind of the response that we're going to get. So I challenge you to kind of think about this too when you go to the youth that you're working with. But if that happens, they're either going to usually watch, listen, then don't do. They may have a pattern of helplessness. I can't do it. They don't believe in me. Why bother? Passivity, low initiative, depression starts to come out, anxiety starts to rise, or we may get resistance. We're shutting you out. You're strong-willed, stubborn. It kind of can go both ways. So even though we have the best intentions of telling them, directing them, putting everything out in front of them to do, that may not be the best approach. So an example. Here, let me help you. Child's likely perception. They want to fix it. They want to fix me. We tend to rush to solve rather than engage a child in the process of discovering a solution. We think, again, they may not have faith in me. So see how this cycle can go. They want to fix it. They don't believe in me. And then we kind of get frustrated. And then after times when they do have to do it on their own, and it doesn't go well, it doesn't go as smooth as my teacher, my coach, my parent, that frustration tolerance is likely going to rise. We may hear those negative comments. I'm stupid. I'm no good. Again, it's coming from a great place, but putting yourselves in the youth's shoes, how it may be perceived. And this is a really great quote. I'm going to read it because I think it's really important on there. But it talks about so often children are punished for being human. Children are not allowed to have grumpy moods, bad days, disrespectful tones, or bad attitudes. Yet we adults have them all the time. We think if we don't nip it in the bud, it will escalate and we'll lose control. Try to let go of that unfounded fear and give your child, your youth, your student permission to be human. We all have days like that. None of us are perfect, and we must stop holding our kids to a higher standard of perfection than we can attain ourselves. All of the punishments you could throw at them won't stamp out their humanity. For to err is human, and we all do it. And I like the part going back, we all have rough days. We all have grumpy moods. Kids have those too, and more so. There was a study that came out as well recently, and it talked about how kids around the age of 5, when we think about brain development, executive functioning, frontal lobe, are about 20-25% kind of growth maturity in their frontal lobe and their abilities, meaning that they're using about 20-25% of their brains at the age of 5. So when they don't respond the first, second, third, fourth time, doesn't necessarily mean that you're a bad parent, a bad teacher, that they're just being defiant, but their brain is only capable of holding so much. And again, temperament, personality, different routines and rules can help increase that percentage and play a role. But being mindful too that kids have bad days. All right. So we talked about anxiety and depression a little bit earlier and the 5 tools for that. And the self-efficacy is a way to help prevent anxiety and depression from creeping back in or from kind of getting so big in the first place. And what we can do is really accept kids for who they are. They're kids, they're learning, they're growing. We also want to give them a chance to contribute. There's lots of studies on gratitude out there, giving back. When they can contribute, when they feel like they are a part of it, again, that sense of belonging, they're more likely to feel included, accepted, and also their beliefs and perceived abilities of themselves will grow. Treat mistakes as learning experiences. There was a teacher that talked about how at the beginning of the school year, she had a jar and said, hey, for every time that I make a mistake, someone in the class kind of makes a mistake, we put it in the jar. When the jar fills, we get a party. We're celebrating making mistakes. We're pointing it out in a constructive way. And the teacher said, hey, let me know when I make a mistake too. Raise your hand. How do we bring it up? How do we talk about it? How do we own it and move forward and stress their strengths? Every kid has strengths. Every adult has strengths. Everyone on this call has strengths in different areas. How do we find those? And helping our youth solve problems and make decisions on their own. Asking, what do you need from me? Do you want to go through the pros and cons? Some may not. And developmentally, they may not be ready for that. But how do we help them solve problems and make decisions and respect those decisions? So this graph will build upon, we think about success on the left, goes down to self-confidence. Again, to self-esteem, what we heard to think about ourselves, how we perceive ourselves, the repeat. When we can repeat the success, self-confidence, self-esteem cycle, it then leads to self-efficacy, our perceived ability to achieve a goal. I can do this. I can study for that test. I can do well. I can navigate different situations. And with that being said, we step into resilience. So we're going to focus a little bit on resilience across developmental stages. And when I say developmental stages, I wanted to break it down more so into kind of school years. And if you have questions for me regarding kind of earlier kiddos or later on, we can definitely talk about that more. But more so, how can we impact the youth that we're working with, whether you're in an elementary, middle school, or high school? And then one or more specific resources we can draw upon. So resilience, great topic to talk about. We think about behaviors, thoughts, and actions that can be learned. This is key. This comes with believing in our youth, trusting that they can develop these skills if they have not already. So resilience is also the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant forms of stress that is going to happen in our lives. That is the constant. Change is always happening. Trauma is likely going to hit us in one way or another. But when we learn how to become resilient, we learn how to embrace the beautifully broad spectrum of the human experience. We don't stay in the stuck. We're able to see something as a speed bump, but not a roadblock. So for our preschoolers, we think about how very young children may not be able to express their feelings at that time. Again, especially with our younger kiddos. But while we may think that they are too young to understand what's happening, even young kids can absorb frightening events from the news or conversations they overhear. This is key, being mindful of what we say in front of others, because their perception of what they hear may be different than the actuality of things. But the biggest thing we can do is help encourage them to ask questions, highlight their efforts. So one of the things I think about too is, do you have questions about what is happening with the fires? Kids may see a big fire on TV over here on the news. They may think it's close to them. Their perception of where California is may not really be developed. Not surprising. But we want to make sure when those questions do come up, some response will be, yes, some people were hurt and many more were there to help. How do we try and tie in that resiliency? Like, how do we ensure them that you are safe here? What is a plan for if a fire were to happen at your school, after school building, or at home? Having plans help reduce anxiety. Another thing that we think about too often is with grief or loss. Family member, pet, something else. When someone dies, their body stops working and they can't see, hear, or feel anything anymore. It's important for kiddos to be concrete and direct. We're not going to go into all the details, but how do we stay factual? How do we encourage them to ask questions? How do we check in about questions that they may have? This can build resiliency if something not so great happened. They may not understand all the nuances behind it, but hey, we're going to be okay, or hey, this is what we could do then. Thinking about our after school programs, I apologize if this is a bit blurry, but I like this visual. I've used it as well. But it talks about resilience. Teachers for Teachers is a great website that has a lot of handouts you can use, but breaking it down into very simple, concrete steps that a preschooler would be able to understand. The ability to bounce back after challenges. We set a goal. We make those steps. We ask for help if we need to. Again, we're vulnerable and dependent on others. We try our best and we celebrate those wins. We have that positive reinforcement. So, how to start building resilience in your programs. And thinking about our elementary schoolers, creating that safe environment is crucial. They want to know that it's a place that they could make mistakes, that they're going to be accepted. They're not going to be patronized for what they do. Engaging in open conversations, providing honest answers to questions while reassuring them of your commitment to their safety. This is where I think about, I'm going to tell you the truth and nothing but the truth. Again, for our little kids too, we're not going to know the whole truth of all the tiny little details. We want to keep it developmentally appropriate. But again, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to give an honest answer in short doses of information. Actively listen to their worries and provide comfort. Actively listening isn't trying to problem solve in the moment or fix it. It's really trying to hear what is going on. And this can really help foster that sense of emotional security. They feel safe talking to us about their feelings. A lot of kids may not for various reasons, but we can start building this in the programs that we work with, the youth that we work with, and being mindful of media exposure to protect their mental well-being. There's a lot going on in the world around us. There's been a lot of changes too recently. So how do we stay mindful of what's going on? How do we be there to ask questions to our schoolers as well, knowing that they are not alone? This is a great resource. Again, if you're in a school program or after school program, there's a resilience rhino. You can kind of look him or her up. There's a mistake maker. There's another great book about how Humpty Dumpty got back up again. So ways to kind of build it into your curriculum, ways to build it into a group that you may have within your school after school program. At home, you can easily kind of talk, okay, what's the mistake that we made today? What did we learn from it? Or just talking it out as our kids get older too. So some ideas to use within the classroom as well. And for middle school, this is a tough period of time. Academic pressures, complex social dynamics, identity changes, shifts, trying to fit in. It is challenging for our middle schoolers, let alone what's kind of going on internally in their bodies as well. So we need to make sure that we foster empathy. Empathy, again, is putting ourselves in their shoes, listening, hearing them out, not feeling sorry for them, but saying, hey, I hear how hard that is. And discussing personal experiences with stress as appropriate. Going back to where's the time that we failed, a time that we were super stressed? How did we overcome it? That could be really helpful to say, hey, you're not alone. We're not minimizing what they're going through, but we're saying, hey, this is tough. This is hard. And you're not going to walk this path by yourself. So continuing that open conversation of how do we talk about our feelings? How do we effectively cope with strategies that are going on? Guiding them through with resilience and compassion. This is a tough phase, but we're going to get through it. How do we get through it? What can we do? How do we build those tools for our toolkit? And Phyllis Daigle is a licensed professional counselor. She has a great blog, website. She has books out there. She has a lot of different speaking engagements too. So I encourage you to look her up if you're in the middle school realm or you work within that population. But it's really helpful. And I think just to highlight, resilience doesn't mean you never fall down. It means that when things go wrong, you get up and put one foot in front of the other, that you hold on to optimism. Keep experimenting and keep testing out new strategies until you find what works, which is so important during the middle school years when so many things can go wrong or feel wrong, even if they are happening exactly as you would be expected developmentally. It's a tough time. There's a lot of feelings going on, a lot of changes. And when one thing seems to get in a rhythm, it's likely going to fall apart, and that's okay. That's what resilience is all about. We're there to help pick up the pieces. We're not putting them together for you, but we're going to be there every step of the way to help keep that one foot going in front of the other. And going on to our high schoolers, how do we foster a sense of connection? I cannot say how crucial it is to engage in conversations whenever possible. Low pressure settings are likely going to be the best. free time. I put that in quotes because I don't know how much free time there actually is, but when we can try and find those free times, that's going to be key. I think of car rides, the dinner table. Car rides are nice because it doesn't necessarily mean we're face to face, which they may feel more comfortable opening up about different parts of their day. Kind of have some go-to questions that you use with youth in your setting. Open-ended questions to help facilitate that conversation. We know that when youth, especially teenagers, have one trusted adult that they can count on, like one role model, they tend to do well. Graduation rates increase. Anxiety and depression tends to go down. You may be that one trusted adult, that one role model that they have. And that means more than a lifetime to them. And how do we create a safe space? It could be if you're at home, in their bedroom, another favorite spot. How do we bring a sense of calm amidst the chaos of high school life? After school programs, teachers, where's a space that your kids can go? This may be extremely limited, and I get that. But I often call it a feeling plan or an anger plan. It consists of stopping, breathing, and taking a break. Where is that break for you at home and at school? Who is that trusted adult for you at home and at school? For some of our kids that we work with, we can write it out in a plan. Stop, breathe, break. Where do we go? Who do we talk to? Share that with your team. Share that with other teachers, after school staff and support. Share it with the family, knowing that, hey, when John wants to go to this spot, that's his safe spot that he's designated, and we're going to respect that. Moving forward, think about screen breaks. Social media is a really big topic right now. We're not going to dive much into that, but screen breaks are healthy. How do we help them process the world and social events at their own pace? Could it be a designated screen-free zone, a screen-free area? Or if you're on screens, it's going to be at the table. It's not going to be upstairs in our room or maybe over in the corner. But if you want to be on your phone, it's going to be at this table and part of the cafeteria. But knowing that breaks are healthy, breaks are good, and being mindful of how we can build those in. And encouraging alternative forms of expression. I often like the word name it to tame it. There's a cathartic release when we talk about our feelings. So just by saying, I feel angry, stressed, upset, we tend to immediately feel better. Studies are out there that show that, which is awesome. So how do we get it out and not hold it in? Well, a fun way for kids is writing it out on a sheet of paper, drawing it out, ripping it up. I feel angry, upset, whatever it is. Write a name down, rip it up, toss it away. Could be a fun way. Try and toss it in a garbage bag, toss it wherever you'd like. But just that release of getting our feelings out in a certain way if we don't feel as comfortable talking about them. And maintaining boundaries. Healthy boundaries are key. As adults, we need to establish healthy boundaries with other people. As youth, we need to help learn how to help establish those healthy boundaries. Healthy boundaries and a sense of stability. Going back to our 5 tools to combat depression and anxiety, keep a routine. Have it be consistent as possible. This can really help our teens navigate this time period with more confidence and self-efficacy when they know what's coming, they know what to expect. And gratitude. While this isn't a presentation about gratitude, gratitude holds a very strong place when we think about resilience and mood and moving forward. So I really like this slide on Instagram. You can follow them. It's called A Cup of Happy Bless. They're on Twitter. They have lots of other great resources. But how to practice gratitude as a student and noticing the positive outcomes in your life can lead to increased mental health, self-esteem, improved self-resilience, and more. So some things that we can do, again, this could also go for younger kids, but pay attention to small positive moments in your life. As adults, I challenge you to notice those small positive moments in the lives of the children that we work with. Verbally express your gratitude. Specific positive praise can be so helpful. Create a gratitude jar for your class. If you see something that happens, every time they drop something in there, maybe they can earn an extra dollar, an extra couple minutes of something. Journal the things that we are grateful for. Everyone can kind of write this down, talk about it out loud or say in their head. What's one positive from the past week of the day? Talk with friends and family about things you are grateful for. When we start to foster gratitude, it's a buffer again against anxiety and depression. So thinking about the development of resilience and self-esteem and self-efficacy, building resilience is a personal journey. I cannot build resilience for you. I can help give you some tools to get there, but it's a personal journey for each person. And understanding a youth's unique needs and behaviors is crucial in guiding them, not doing it for them, but guiding them. And it's important to tailor your approach to fit the individual circumstances and challenges, as what works for one child or student may not resonate or work for another one. Again, this presentation is really about building tools for your toolkit to be able to use. What are some ideas to help work with the youth that you have, but also in ourselves? It can be draining and exhausting doing the day-to-day work that you all do, whether again at home, at schools, or after school programs. We need to take time for ourselves as well. So how do we kind of start to teach, start to recognize, again, for youth and ourselves, that change is a part of living. It is going to happen, whether we like it or not. So how can we start accepting it? Again, doesn't mean we have to, again, enjoy it. We can have all the feelings about it, but knowing it's going to happen. How do we help avoid seeing crisis as insurmountable problems? Is that anxiety, that worry cycle? What's in our control versus what's out of our control? Recognizing that there are things that we can control every single day. And there are things that are out of our control. So how do we focus our attention? How do we delve our energy into things that we can focus on? How do we treat other people? How do we react? What we teach, what we choose to focus on, and being aware of weaknesses and vulnerabilities. We are all vulnerable. We all have different strengths. We all have different talents too. Those need to be celebrated. And so going back to kind of this slide, we get the resiliency at the end. When we have success, we can build self-confidence, which leads to self-esteem. We repeat that cycle, those 4 circles on the left, that develops that self-efficacy, our perceived ability of what we can do, which then leads to resilience, adapting to change in a positive way, keeping an optimistic outlook despite all the negative things that are going on around us. So when we think about key aspects from today, adults cannot create true self-esteem. That comes from within. But we can foster self-efficacy by having those opportunities for success, being there to help support and guide along the way. And when resiliency improves, when we start to develop that skill, that is going to improve our mental health outcomes for the years to come. We can shift our mindset to not look at a situation all in the negative, but find some of the positives, find where we can take a step forward, rise from the ashes. We can start to build that resilience. So with my presentations, I call these the 3 R's: review, repeat, retain. So again, self-esteem requires that confidence. When we have confidence, we can have kind of that success. Success will build that self-efficacy, again, our perceived ability of what we can do. When we perceive ourselves to overcome challenges, navigate difficult times, we can build resilience. And resilience is going to help us combat anxiety and depression. When something comes up, we'll feel more equipped to handle it. So again, therefore, our jobs, caregivers, parents, professionals, friends, daughters, kids, is to foster success in our future generations. How do we help them live to their potential with some of the tools that we talked about today and everything else that you are doing? With that being said, I have a handful of different resources available. I have some of the articles that look at kind of the research, the nitty gritty. I have some of the American Psychological Association modules, which I'm going to show on the next page. There's also some of the youth risk survey data for state by state, as well as within 2022, 23, 24, as well as the Mental Health America information that talks about how kind of each state ranks in different areas. There's also a book called Raising Resilience that you could always add to your library through Audible or the hard copy that can really help our children thrive in times of uncertainty, and I would definitely recommend that. Another resource for some of our high schoolers that I wanted to share a visual of for those who may be working with them is our American Psychological Association. The link is at the bottom. Has scripts, has introductions, has lesson plans and modules to help teach resilience. So if you have an after-school group, a program, you can take bits and pieces. All of this is free. I think there's about 4 to 6 different lesson plans that all accompany a worksheet. So you could just use the worksheet, you could do the script, you can do the activity, but some take-home resources that you could use within your own setting as well. And with that being said, I wanted to make sure that we had some time at the end for any questions that you may have. But more importantly, thank you all for staying present during this presentation and for joining me today and the Wisconsin Out of School Time Alliance for having me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Offenwinger. We appreciate you joining us this morning. We'll take a moment. If anyone has questions, you can put them in the chat or you can unmute. We do have a fairly sizable group, but I think we can still do that. We will be sending out a follow-up email with links. So I see that question in the chat. I'm also going to quickly launch our evaluation poll. We very much appreciate if you would take just a moment and respond to that poll. We use that information to kind of help us inform our future um, presentations and learning opportunities. We do have some upcoming webinars that I do want to make you aware of. The next webinar in this mental health series will be in March with Dr. Diestelman. He will be talking about supporting relationship and social skills building in our program spaces. We have a webinar next month in February as part of our Whole Child, Whole Family learning series, and that will be on trust-based relational intervention in supporting challenging behaviors and young people with early trauma histories. So we will look forward to having you participate and engage in either or both of those upcoming webinars. We will put our email in the chat. If you have any questions, you can reach out to us here at WASTA. And thank you all again for participating. We will hang on for a moment if there are any questions.
And thanks in the chat, they mentioned the APA resources. They do have different modules for